person who started His House. And we just celebrated 50 years of campus ministry with His House this summer. And so he was our executive director, and Scott, who spoke last week, is our new executive director. So this is Gary Hawes. He's our founder, was our executive director for many, many years, and he's going to come and continue our Abide series. And let me pray for him. Come on now. God, I thank you so much for my friend and mentor, Gary. God, I pray that your Spirit would speak through him tonight, a message that applies to every one of us, God. And God, we give you this time. Pray that you eliminate distractions, tune us into you. And we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
You are blessed tonight in this academic year. Some of you are new, some of you are experienced. And what a wonderful mix. But you don't know the entirety of the opportunity that you will have on a regular basis. Troy is the campus minister. And he is a great teacher, leader. And you may not hear from him regularly until next semester. But there's reasoning there. So tonight, you see a scrub. That's the guy that we put in when somebody is hurt or not able to do the job. And Troy is the man. I'm just here on a one-shot basis. So if you don't like it, take heart. It'll be better in the future. He's assisted by his lovely wife, Heather. And if you don't know them well because you're new, you will. And you'll be blessed. That's all I'm saying. Tonight, we are going to look at 7 verses in the book of John, and we're in chapter 15. Now, what's good about this is that we have a theme. We haven't even have t-shirts to celebrate that theme. And the first one I saw, I loved. Second one I saw, I loved. I love all of them because they're the same. And they remind us to stay on track. We're talking about abiding. And I want to read the first 6 verses of chapter 15 and then skip to verse 16. Jesus says, I am the true vine, and my Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit, while every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes, so that it will be even more fruitful. You are already clean because of the word I have spoken to you. Remain in me, and I will remain in you. No branch can bear fruit by itself. It must remain in the vine. Neither can you bear fruit unless you remain in me. I'm repeating, but it's a new verse. I am the vine. You are the branches. If a man remains in me and I in him, he will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. If anyone does not remain in me, he is like a branch that is thrown away and withers. Such branches are picked up, thrown into the fire, and burned. Verse 16, you did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you to go and bear fruit. Fruit that will last, then the Father will give you whatever you ask in my name. Why in the world does Jesus talk about vines and branches and gardeners? I didn't even know they had gardeners 2,000 years ago, but there was a guy that was important in another passage that was a gardener. The reason is that Jesus is using pictures and images to convey a truth to his disciples, which include us. Vines were such an important part of the religious heritage of the Jewish nation. In the Old Testament, Israel is often pictured as the vine or vineyard of God. Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and Hosea, prophets in the Old Testament, all referred to Israel as either the vine or the vineyard. Even the psalmist referred to Israel and the deliverance of God's people out of Egypt as, and I quote from Psalms chapter 80, verse 8, you have brought a vine out of Egypt. I didn't realize before I put all this together that we were so interested in vines and branches and gardeners. But this passage helps us to understand what Jesus was trying to convey. These references are so frequent that the vine had actually become the symbol of the nation of Israel. The emblem on the coins of the Maccabees during the 400 years between the Old Testament and the New Testament was the vine. One of the glories of the temple was the great golden vine upon the front of the holy place. I didn't remember that. Well, one reason is the temple isn't there today in the same way it was, and so nobody has really seen that. But it is described in the Old Testament. And the most symbolic thing about the temple was the vine that was gold and spread across all the front of the holy place. And Jewish men competed to give their gold so that another golden vine could be added to the original, and they could say, I don't know, to each other, to the kids, to whomever would listen to them, hey, it's because of me that we've got that other vine. And some guys didn't have quite as much gold, but they still wanted to recognize themselves. They paid for a leaf that went on the vine that was already there in gold. Well, that was a pretty significant symbol. In our passage, Jesus calls himself, starts right out, verse 1, chapter 15. I am the vine, the true vine, the real vine, the genuine vine. How do we know that? Because of the Greek word alethenos, which, why is that word so important? Well, the point is this. In the Old Testament, every time a vine or a vineyard was described by a prophet, it was never separated from the idea of degeneration. That vine is dying. That vine is dead. That vine is of no production. That vine is terrible. All those references in the Old Testament were how bad the vine was. Never is it positive, except when it appeared. I mean, it was placed there on the front of the temple. For instance, the point of Isaiah's picture is that the vine has run wild. It's Jeremiah's complaint that the nation has turned into a degenerate plant of a strange vine. Hosea's cry was that Israel is an empty vine. So there was nothing good about the picture of vines in the Old Testament. Now Jesus comes along and he says, I'm the real one. I am the vine in what I'm conveying to you. Jesus is the real vine, the genuine one, the perfect vine, if you will. Now, it's as if, now follow me here because this is good. It's as if Jesus said, you think, he was talking to his disciples, they were all Jewish, okay? Born in Israel, they were raised in Israel, and they thought they were God's chosen people. And that they qualified for something special called salvation, relationship with God, that other people couldn't have. If you remember, that became later in the New Testament a little controversy of whether or not a Jew could become a Christian. But Jesus was saying to his disciples, I think, you think that you belong to the nation of Israel because you are a branch in the true vine of God. You think that just because you are a Jew and because of your race, your birth, or your nationality, you are a branch in the vine of God. Jesus says, no! But you know, there are people that say that today. I don't know if you've ever heard this, but I have. Are you a Christian? Well, I'm an American. Okay, answer my question. Some people, especially older people like me, equate their nationality with their religion. The Jews believed strongly that because they were Jewish, they were God's people. Now, he chose them, but do you know what? I almost want to cry when I tell you this, because, but it's true. It's not the nation who is the true vine. The nation of Israel is a degenerate vine, as all the prophets saw and illustrated through the whole entire Old Testament. Jesus said, I am the vine. It's not the fact that you are a Jew that will save you. The only thing that can save you is if you have an intimate relationship with me, Jesus said. Now, this is so important for us to get today. You have your parents' last name, and that name has a reputation. And oftentimes it's sterling silver. And people knew your parents, your grandparents, and they admired them because they were good people, and they were God-fearing people, and they love Jesus. But we can't get into heaven on their reputation. That's what this passage is telling us. I am the vine, and you must be branches of that vine joined to me. Race, nationality, it means nothing. Jewish blood, I know I'm talking to the wrong people here, but I'll say it. Jewish blood is not the way to salvation. Only by understanding it is Jesus' blood, not ours, that can lead us to salvation. Now, do you know what I mean? We are saved and come into a relationship with God and learn to love Jesus because of his death, burial, and resurrection. I just thought, and I don't know if this applies to any of you, but it has applied to me at different times in my life. I'm not proud of it, believe me. But what have I, and you can put in there you if you want, what have you depended upon for your relationship with God? There was a time that I depended upon knowledge. I acquired over the years enough degrees that some people thought I was a thermometer. And so I depended upon knowledge. Do you know anybody like that? Boy, I know this thing backwards and forwards. I know so much stuff that doesn't mean anything. Can't depend on knowledge. My parents were good people. I know many of yours were. And I didn't mind telling people about that, but when I went to bed at night, I thought, because I was born into that family, I had a head start on everybody else. I grew out of that, but I want to say there was a period in my life where that was the case. I know some people that depend on money, and I can think of two classes of Jewish people that depended on these wealthiest Jews that wanted to make a gold vine. They thought that would not own, they were already in, but they would have a little better place if they contributed something as valuable as gold to the house of God, the temple. And then there were the people that didn't have quite as much that said, at least I'm contributing something, and you know, all these people don't. So obviously my money will help me get there. Some people depend on good works. Well, I help little old ladies across the street, and I do good things, and I help people, and I'm generous. Isn't that a good thing? Won't that get me related? No. Now, notice the next part. A fruitful vine, if it's giving off beautiful leaves and fruit, requires pruning. You ever had or watched somebody prune limbs and branches off from a tree? I try to do that, and I have a little problem. But God is the pruner. He's the gardener. That means he's in charge of pruning and cutting. We are the branches. God cuts off every branch that does not bear fruit. Whew. Every branch that has fruit will be pruned. way you're going to get pruned. That means that everybody in this room has either been, is in the process of being, or will be pruned by God. That means that you will go through interesting situations in your life that require you to believe God. Well, I lost somebody that I really care for. God uses a variety of experiences always to make us better. It's kind of like gold. Gold is mined out of the ground and it's in the middle of ore. And when that ore goes under heat, it melts it all away and the gold is left. But the hotter the flame, the more pure is the gold. Well, Gary, you don't know what I've been through. I know you've been through something or will be. God promises as the gardener. Either way, if we're fruitful, he's going to make us more fruitful. Did you see that also if we're an unfruitful branch, he is going to cut us off. Who was Jesus thinking of when he spoke of the fruitless branches? I think there are two people groups here. One are the Jews. They were branches of God's vine, but they refused to accept it. That's what cut them off. They were withered and useless. The disciples said to them, I can't believe that with all the signs, all the miracles, all the love that's flying around through Jesus, that the Jews reject him. Secondly, I think Jesus was looking ahead to us. And he was applying this, or we can apply this to Christians, whose relationship with Jesus, our Christianity, is consisted of a profession. Oh yeah, sign me up. Now, do I sign something, or do I just mark a box to say that I'm a Christian? But how do you practice what you say you believe? Is the question. I thought tonight it might be fun if I brought about 80 fruit baskets and then 3,000 apples, and asked each of you to put as many apples in your fruit basket as people that you have personally won to Jesus. And then I'd ask you to come up here and count out the apples, and then the person that had them up, I'm kidding. I want you to know that bearing fruit, which this passage is about, includes winning somebody else to Jesus. I want to be sure that I don't do that without your understanding. There are three ways that we can be useless branches. If we refuse to listen to Jesus at all, if we listen to him and respond with the lip service unsupported by deeds, or we accept him and then become influenced by the world and abandon him. All of those are useless branches. We abide in him by staying close in contact. Now, if you take notes, if you remember anything from what I say tonight, remember this next thought. This is our takeaway tonight. I'm going to say something half decent, okay? This is our takeaway. I want you to know the secret of the life of Jesus. Why was he different? Well, he was the Son of God, and none of us can get there. But as you read the New Testament, read the biographies, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, of Jesus, you notice that there's something unusual about Jesus. And I never saw this as clearly as I have when I have been studying this passage for tonight. So don't think that, hey, I got this when I was a teenager and I've known it my whole life. No, that's not true. The secret that Jesus, why he was able to live through all of the temptation, through all of the controversy, through all of the rejection that he did, was that he was in contact with his Father. Again and again and again, Jesus drew apart to a solitary place where it was just him and his Father. Now, for instance, he was baptized in Matthew chapter 4, and what happened in Matthew, right after he was baptized by his cousin, John the Baptizer, he went into the wilderness for 40 days. Now, why do you think he went into the wilderness? Satan met him there, but he went there to be alone with his Father. The night that he was betrayed, you remember in the Garden of Gethsemane, he was praying with his disciples, or 11 of them. All 12 couldn't make it. You know what happened to the other one. He was praying with them, and he said, what did he say? Oh, this is so much fun. Let's hold hands and sing Kumbaya. You know, because I'm not going to be here long, and I think it'd be fun to do some little group activity. Group prayer. No. He said, I'm going to go over there by myself, and I'd kind of like to have you guys pray for me as I'm talking to my Father. And, you know, it would just be helpful to me. Okay? Oh, we got it. We have it. We love it. We don't have to walk over there. And so, of course, we don't know how long he was gone, but it was long enough for them all to fall asleep. So he went back. He said, guys, I ask you to pray for me. I've been with my Father. It's been, he has sweat on his face from praying. He was intense in conversation with his Father. So he said, hey, let's really do it this time. Will you stay awake? Oh, yeah, I don't know what happened. I think it must have been in the air. Something we breathed, we all, couldn't stay awake. And so they did the whole thing over again, and you know what happened? He came back. They were all asleep. He said, guys, let's try this again. Now, why didn't he stay there? Because he was talking to his Father. This time he came back, he was sweating, but he was sweating drops of blood. He was so intense. That's what the Bible says. I didn't make that up. You know that. He was having a little conversation. So the last time he came, the third time he came back, he said, go ahead and sleep. I can't deal with this. I've got some people coming that want to talk to me. Yeah, boy, and they did. They took him away. And you know where the disciples went? They'd been together sleeping. They hadn't been talking to the Father. They didn't have any spiritual power in their life to even go with him, to see him, to stand up for him. Peter denied him 3 times, if you remember, that evening. But where did Jesus get his power? He got it from conversation with his dad. I don't know if it's okay to call God Dad, but you know what I mean. His heavenly Father. And we can go on and on about the times he got up before dawn and went out by himself to a solitary place because he wanted to listen to a podcast and he wanted to make a few calls from the night before. He wanted to be on his computer. He wanted to do this. No. He didn't even want to brush his teeth when he got up. He wanted to be alone with his Father in prayer. I have just a short suggestion on how we can remain in our Father's presence. When we wake up in the morning, I want us to picture ourselves lying in bed, and I picture the mattress as an altar. And before we even get out of it, to brush our teeth, go to the bathroom, turn on the whatever, we say something like, I want to offer to you my body as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to you. Physically, give ourselves to God. Then, when we eat during the day, we give God thanks. And that turns our mind to, that's an excuse. None of us miss very many meals, especially me. But when we do, that reminds us to thank God. We have communication with Him. And you might say, well, some things I don't want to thank God for because it's not good for me. Well, then don't eat it. Well, I don't think I can thank Him for this drink. It's not the kind that, then don't drink it. But I'm thinking of ways to have our mind turned to Him. And then I'm saying before we go to sleep at night, thank you, God, for today. Thank you for allowing my body to be a living sacrifice. And you know what's the difficulty with a living sacrifice? They squirm off the altar. That's why they kill them first. And that's what we're doing in the morning. We're saying, not me, but you. Abiding always leads to closeness, active awareness, and an intimate relationship with Jesus. A disciple disciplines his own life toward godliness. A disciple brings glory to God. A true disciple disciples others who disciple others. And this is completely unrelated, but I want to say this and have you think about it, and it'll hit you on your walk home. God doesn't clean his fish until he catches them.
So the worship team can sneak up here.